I've always believed that architecture is the art of creating spaces that shape lives. Little did I know that the most important space I'd ever design would be the one I carved out for myself in a world that tried to erase me. My name is Evangeline Hart, Eva to the few who truly know me. I'm 30 years old, and until recently, I was just another architect at Hart & Company, the real estate empire built by my father, Victor Hart. But I was never just another architect. I was the invisible pillar holding up a crumbling legacy, the unacknowledged genius behind our most innovative designs. Growing up in the Hart household was like living in a perfectly staged model home. Everything looked flawless from the outside, but it was hollow, devoid of warmth. My father, Victor, was the self-proclaimed king of New York real estate, a man who saw the world as his personal chessboard and his children as pawns to be moved at will. My mother, Eleanor, was his queen, more concerned with maintaining our family's social status than nurturing her children's dreams. And then there was Julian, my older brother. The golden child. The heir apparent. While I pored over blueprints and sketched designs late into the night, Julian schmoozed clients and basked in our father's approval. It didn't matter that his architectural skills were mediocre at best. In the Hart family, charisma trumped talent every time. I remember the day I realized my place in this family wasn't just overlooked, it was non-existent. I was 22, fresh out of architecture school with honors, eager to prove myself at Hart & Company. I had spent months working on a revolutionary design for a sustainable skyscraper, a structure that would redefine the New York skyline. The day of the presentation, I stood before the board of directors, my heart racing with excitement. I was halfway through explaining the innovative energy systems when my father interrupted. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice booming across the room, "what my daughter is trying to say is that Hart & Company is stepping into the future of green architecture. This design, my design, will set a new standard for sustainable living." I froze, the words dying in my throat. My design. My months of work. My vision. All claimed by Victor Hart with a smile and a wink to his cronies. That was the moment the foundation of my world cracked. But like any good architect, I knew that sometimes, you need to tear down the old to build something truly remarkable. Years passed, and I learned to work within the shadows of Hart & Company. I became a ghost, haunting the halls of our sleek office building, my designs manifesting under my father's name, my brother's smug grin, or simply credited to the Hart & Company team. I told myself it was enough to see my visions realized, even if no one knew they were mine. I convinced myself that one day, my father would see my worth, that Julian would acknowledge my talent. That my mother would look at me with pride instead of vague disappointment. But deep down, in the part of me that still dared to dream, I was designing something else entirely, a plan for my own liberation. The catalyst came on my 30th birthday. There was no celebration, of course. Birthdays were frivolous things in the Hart household, unless they involved gala fundraisers or networking opportunities. I spent the evening alone in my apartment, a glass of wine in one hand and a sketchpad in the other, when my phone buzzed with a text from Clara, my grandmother. Clara was the black sheep of the family, the one who dared to challenge Victor's authority and paid the price by being cut off. She was also the only person who ever truly saw me. "Happy birthday, my dear," the message read. "I hope you're not working too hard. Remember, you're a Hart. You were born to build empires, not prop them up." Attached was a photo, a yellowed newspaper clipping from decades ago. It showed a young Victor Hart standing proudly in front of a construction site. But it wasn't Victor that caught my eye. It was the woman beside him, her face alight with passion and determination. My grandmother. The caption read, "Victor and Clara Hart break ground on revolutionary new development." I stared at the image, my mind reeling. I had never seen this before, had never known that my grandmother was once part of Hart & Company. What had happened? Why had she been erased from our family's history? As if sensing my questions, another text from Clara appeared, "There's so much you don't know, Eva. So much that's been hidden from you. It's time you learned the truth about your legacy." That night, as the city lights flickered outside my window, I made a decision. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I would reclaim my birthright, not as a heart, but as myself, Evangeline, the architect of her own destiny. Little did I know, the blueprint I was about to draw would shake the very foundations of everything I thought I knew. The next few weeks were a blur of clandestine meetings and late-night research. Clara became my guide, unveiling the hidden history of Heart and Company, piece by piece. "Your grandfather and I built this company together," she told me over coffee in a quiet cafe, far from the prying eyes of the Heart social circle. "We had a vision of creating spaces that would uplift communities, not just line our pockets." I listened, enraptured, as she spoke of the early days, the struggles, the triumphs, the innovations that put Heart and Company on the map. But as the company grew, so did Victor's ambition. "He became obsessed with power," Clara said, her eyes clouding with old pain. "The vision we shared twisted into something ugly. When I tried to steer us back on course, he pushed me out. Erased me from the company records. Your father was always skilled at rewriting history to suit his narrative." The truth was a weight on my chest, but also a fire in my veins. I thought of all the years I had spent trying to earn a place in a legacy that was rightfully mine to begin with. Armed with this knowledge, I began to look at Heart and Company with new eyes. I saw the cracks in the facade, the shortcuts taken, the ethical lines blurred in pursuit of profit. And I started to document everything. Late one night, as I was combing through old project files, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. It was a series of emails between my father and Julian, discussing ways to cut costs on our latest development, a luxury apartment complex in Brooklyn. "Use the cheaper materials," my father had written. "No one will notice the difference, and it'll save us millions." Julian's response turned my stomach, "Already on it, Dad. I'll make sure the inspectors look the other way." Heart magic, right? I sat back, my mind reeling. This wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. And dangerous. They were putting lives at risk for the sake of profit. In that moment, I realized that taking down Heart and Company wasn't just about reclaiming my place. It was about protecting innocent people from my family's greed. But I needed more. More evidence, more allies, more power. And I knew just where to start. The Eden Project had been my secret obsession for years, a revolutionary design for a fully sustainable, community-focused residential complex. I had poured my heart and soul into every detail, knowing that Heart and Company would never approve such an altruistic endeavor. Now, it would become my weapon. As dawn broke over the city, I made a call to an old friend from architecture school who now worked for our biggest competitor. "Liam? It's Eva. I have a proposition for you. How would you like to change the face of New York real estate?" The game was on. And this time I was playing to win. The next few months were a delicate balancing act. By day, I continued my role as the dutiful daughter and underappreciated architect at Heart and Company. I attended meetings, submitted designs, always credited to others, and played the part of the invisible cog in the machine. But by night, I was building my case and my future. I met with Liam and his team in secret, refining the Eden Project plans. We pored over every detail, ensuring that it wasn't just innovative, but flawless. This had to be more than just a building, it had to be a statement, a vision of what architecture could be when divorced from greed and ego. Meanwhile, I continued to gather evidence of Heart and Company's misdeeds. It was everywhere once I knew where to look: falsified inspection reports, bribes thinly disguised as consulting fees, corners cut on safety measures. Each discovery made me sick, but also strengthened my resolve. I was so focused on my mission that I almost missed the signs that my carefully constructed facade was cracking. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was in my office, secretly finalizing the Eden Project presentation. I was so engrossed that I didn't hear the door open. "What's this?" I jumped, quickly minimizing the screen, but it was too late. Julian stood in the doorway, his eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Nothing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just some personal project ideas. Julian stepped closer, his cologne, always too strong, making me want to gag. Personal projects? On company time? You know Dad wouldn't approve of that, sis. I forced a smile. You're right. I'll stick to heart and company work from now on. He lingered for a moment, his gaze sweeping over my desk as if looking for more secrets. Finally, he shrugged. See that you do. We've got the Millennium Tower presentation next week, and Dad wants all hands on deck. As he left, I let out a shaky breath. That was too close. I needed to be more careful. But Julian's suspicion had planted a seed of urgency. I couldn't wait much longer. The longer I delayed, the higher the chance of discovery. That night, I made 2 calls. The first was to Liam. We need to move up the timeline, I told him. How soon can we go public with Eden? His hesitation was palpable. Eva, are you sure? We could use a few more weeks too. No, I cut him off. It has to be now. Next week, at the latest. After a moment, he agreed. All right. I'll make it happen. But Eva, are you ready for this? There's no going back once we pull the trigger. Was I ready to destroy my family's legacy? To burn the bridges I'd spent a lifetime trying to cross? To step out of the shadows and into a spotlight that could either elevate or annihilate me? I'm ready, I said, and I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. The second call was to a journalist I had cultivated a relationship with over the past few months. Sarah Chen was known for her hard-hitting exposés on corporate corruption. I have something for you, I said when she answered. How would you like to break open the biggest scandal in New York real estate history? As I hung up, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. The die was cast. In 1 week, I would either reclaim my birthright or lose everything. But as I looked out over the glittering New York skyline, a skyline I had helped shape from the shadows, I knew one thing for certain: win or lose, I would no longer be invisible. The day of reckoning arrived with a sky full of ominous clouds, fitting weather for the storm I was about to unleash. I dressed with particular care that morning, choosing a sharp charcoal suit that made me feel armored. As I fastened my grandmother's antique brooch to my lapel, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked fierce, determined. Ready. The Hart & Company offices were buzzing with excitement for the Millennium Tower presentation. This was supposed to be our crowning achievement, the tallest residential building in the city, a monument to luxury and excess. If only they knew. I sat through the morning meeting in a haze, my mind racing ahead to what was to come. My father droned on about profit margins and marketing strategies, while Julian preened and took credit for ideas that weren't his. It was business as usual at Hart & Company. At precisely 11:45 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. It's live. I excused myself, citing a need for fresh air, and escaped to the roof terrace. There, overlooking the city I loved, I watched as my family's empire began to crumble. Sarah's exposé was devastating and comprehensive. Years of corruption laid bare, the bribes, the cover-ups, the disregard for safety regulations. And at the center of it all, the damning emails between my father and brother, discussing the Millennium Tower's subpar materials as if they were discussing the weather. My phone exploded with notifications. Emails from horrified clients, texts from confused colleagues, missed calls from my mother. And then, the one I had been waiting for, a furious summons from Victor Hart himself. I took a deep breath and headed to the lion's den. The scene in my father's office was chaos. Julian was shouting into his phone, my mother was weeping dramatically on the leather sofa, and Victor was ominously calm. Sit down, Evangeline, he said, his voice glacial. I remained standing. I think I'll stay right here, Dad. His eyes narrowed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've done exactly what you taught me to do, I replied, my voice steady. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. Julian whirled on me, his face red with rage. You? You did this? Our own sister? I met his gaze coolly. I'm not your sister, Julian. I'm not even your colleague. I'm the architect you've been stealing from for years. How dare you, my mother gasped. After everything we've given you. Given me? I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. You've given me nothing but scraps from your table. You've stolen my work, my ideas, my very identity. Victor stood slowly, his imposing frame looming over the desk. You ungrateful little. But whatever insult he was about to hurl was cut off by a commotion outside. The door burst open, and in strode Liam, flanked by a team of reporters and cameras. Ms. Hart, he said, his eyes twinkling with suppressed excitement, are you ready to unveil the Eden Project? The look of confusion on my family's faces would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. Eden Project? Julian sputtered. What the hell is going on? I straightened my spine and faced the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Evangeline Hart, and I'm here to show you the future of sustainable urban living. For the next 20 minutes, I presented my vision to the world. The Eden Project in all its glory, a self-sustaining community that would redefine green architecture. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on my father's face. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a coup. When I finished, the room erupted in questions and exclamations of awe. But I only had eyes for my family. This, I said, gesturing to the holographic model of Eden hovering before us, this is what Hart and Company could have been. Should have been. A force for positive change, not just another corrupt corporation. Victor's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. You'll never get away with this. I'll bury you. I smiled, and for the first time in years, it was genuine. No, Dad. You won't. Because as of an hour ago, the board voted to remove you as CEO. Pending a full investigation, of course. As security arrived to escort my family out, I turned back to the cameras. There was one last thing I needed to say. To everyone who's ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or erased, this is for you. Your voice matters. Your vision matters. And it's time to build a world where everyone has the space to thrive. As the reporters clamored for more, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Clara, her eyes shining with pride. Well done, my dear, she said softly. You've reclaimed your legacy. I took her hand and squeezed it. No, Grandma. We've reclaimed our legacy. And this is just the beginning. The months following the fall of Hart and Company were a whirlwind of legal battles, media frenzies, and sleepless nights. But through it all, I stood firm, buoyed by the knowledge that I was finally building something true. Victor and Julian faced the brunt of the legal consequences. The evidence I had gathered, combined with testimony from employees emboldened by the exposé, painted a damning picture. They were sentenced to prison terms for fraud and endangerment, their carefully cultivated images shattered beyond repair. My mother, Eleanor, retreated to our Hamptons estate, emerging only to make tearful pleas for privacy on national television. I almost pitied her, this woman who had spent her life as a beautiful ornament in Victor's world, now forced to face a reality she was ill-equipped to handle. As for me? I threw myself into the Eden Project with a fervor that surprised even myself. Every day brought new challenges, but also new joys. I assembled a team of brilliant, ethical minds, people who shared my vision of architecture as a force for social good. There were setbacks, of course. Some clients, spooked by the Hart and Company scandal, pulled out of the project. Others, intrigued by the controversy, signed on. Through it all, I learned to stand tall under the spotlight I had once feared. 6 months after the fateful day in Victor's office, I stood on the grounds where the Eden Project would soon rise. The first foundation stones were being laid, each one a promise of the future we were building. As I watched the workers bustling about, I felt a presence beside me. Clara, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight, linked her arm through mine. Your grandfather would be so proud, she said softly. This is what we dreamed of, all those years ago. I leaned my head on her shoulder, feeling the weight of legacy, not as a burden now, but as a source of strength. "Tell me about him," I said. "Tell me everything." And there, amid the dust and promise of new beginnings, Clara shared stories of the man I had never known. The idealist who had started Heart and Company with dreams of changing the world, one building at a time. The husband and father who had been slowly corrupted by power and greed. "You're so like him, Eva," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "The best parts of him. The parts one fell in love with." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the construction site, I made a silent vow. I would honor that legacy, not the tarnished Heart and Company name, but the original vision of creating spaces that elevate the human spirit. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be skeptics to convince, regulations to navigate, and a world to change. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely alive. I am Evangeline Hart. Architect. Visionary. Builder of dreams. And my story? It's only just beginning. 5 years have passed since the day I reclaimed my name and my purpose. The Eden Project stands tall now, a gleaming testament to what's possible when vision meets integrity. It hasn't all been smooth sailing. There were nights when doubt crept in, when the weight of what I had done, to my family, to myself, threatened to crush me. But each morning, I would walk through Eden, watching children play in the rooftop gardens, seeing neighbors share meals in the communal spaces, and I knew I had made the right choice. Victor was released from prison last year. I received a letter from him, full of bitterness and recrimination. I read it once, then burned it, letting the ashes scatter in the wind from Eden's highest point. Some foundations are too rotten to build upon. Julian, ever the opportunist, has reinvented himself as a reformed corporate whistleblower, giving TED Talks about ethics and business. I watch his performances sometimes, marveling at his ability to spin self-interest into self-righteousness. But I feel no anger anymore, only a distant pity. My mother made overtures of reconciliation, tentative invitations to tea that I declined politely but firmly. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. The only family that matters now is the one I've chosen. Clara, of course, who has become Eden's beloved matriarch, holding court in the community center and regaling residents with tales of architectural adventures. Liam, whose unwavering support has blossomed into something deeper, something we're exploring with cautious joy. And then there's my team, the brilliant minds and passionate souls who believed in Eden when it was nothing but lines on paper. Together, we're expanding the vision, breaking ground on new projects across the country. Sustainable housing for low-income families in Detroit. A revolutionary eco-friendly school campus in New Orleans. Each one a step towards the future we believe in. I still dream in blueprints and wake with visions of soaring spires and light-filled spaces. But now, those dreams don't haunt me, they inspire me. Every day, I walk into our offices, nothing like the cold, sterile halls of Heart and Company, and I feel a thrill of possibility. There's so much work still to be done. Our cities are crying out for renewal, for spaces that nurture rather than isolate. The challenges of climate change and social inequality loom large. But I face them now not with fear, but with determination. Because I've learned the most important lesson of all, we are the architects of our own lives. Every day, we choose the legacy we leave behind. We decide what to preserve, what to demolish, and what to build anew. My name is Evangeline Hart. And I'm building a future where everyone has room to grow, to thrive, to become the best version of themselves. Care to join me? There's always room for one more dreamer in this blueprint for a better world.